Lieutenant Commander Takeshi Morimoto steadies himself against the violent shudder of his destroyer's deck as the first explosion tears through the pre-dawn darkness of April 12, 1945. Through the spray-soaked windows of the bridge, he watches something that defies every principle of naval warfare he learned at the Imperial Naval Academy. Massive four-engine bombers, the dreaded B-29 Superfortresses that should be bombing cities from 30,000 feet, are screaming toward his convoy at what appears to be impossibly low altitude. Their undersides are illuminated by the hellish glow of tracer fire, revealing modifications that transform them into something monstrous. Gun barrels protrude from every angle like the quills of some mechanical porcupine, and beneath their wings hang not the standard bombs, but something far more terrifying. Experimental incendiary canisters designed to turn the ocean itself into flame. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The convoy of Operation Ketsu-Go Phase Three, carrying the last hope of defending Okinawa, with 8,400 elite troops and critical ammunition stores, has sailed for 3 days believing they would reach their destination under cover of darkness and weather. But someone, somewhere in the vast intelligence network of the American military machine, knew exactly where they would be at this precise moment. As Morimoto watches the lead transport, the Hokuriku Maru, erupt in a fountain of fire that seems to spread across the water itself like liquid death, he realizes with crystalline clarity that the next 60 seconds will determine whether his ship survives, whether his men live, whether Japan retains any ability to resist the Allied advance toward the home islands. The modified superfortresses are already so close he can see the artwork painted on their noses, demonic faces grinning in anticipation of the slaughter they are about to unleash. The story of how American B-29 Superfortresses became low-altitude gunships capable of incinerating entire naval convoys begins not in the Pacific Theater, but in a classified hangar at Wright Field, Ohio, in the frozen January of 1945. Colonel Marcus Wendell Hayes stands before a blackboard covered in equations and sketches, explaining an idea so audacious that half the officers in the room think he has lost his mind. The B-29, crown jewel of American strategic bombing, costs nearly $1 million per aircraft. It represents the cutting edge of aviation technology with its pressurized cabin, remote-controlled gun turrets, and ability to fly higher and farther than any bomber in history. The suggestion that these technological marvels should be stripped of their sophisticated bombing equipment and sent to attack ships at wave-top height seems not just wasteful but criminally insane. Hayes is not insane, he is desperate. A graduate of MIT with a degree in aeronautical engineering before the war, he had been working as a test pilot when Pearl Harbor transformed his career trajectory. Now, at 41 years old, with gray already streaking his dark hair, he commands a special projects division tasked with solving problems that conventional military thinking cannot address. The problem currently consuming his every waking hour is this: Japan's merchant fleet, though badly depleted, still manages to move troops and supplies between the home islands and their remaining Pacific strongholds. Traditional submarine interdiction is effective but limited. High-altitude bombing of ships has proven woefully inaccurate. The Navy's carriers are stretched thin supporting the island-hopping campaign. What the Allies need is a way to guarantee the destruction of any convoy attempting to reinforce Japan's crumbling defensive perimeter. Hayes had been studying after-action reports from the Southwest Pacific when he discovered references to something called skip bombing, a technique pioneered by General George Kenney's 5th Air Force using B-25 Mitchell bombers. The results had been devastating, but B-25 was a medium bomber with limited range and payload. What if the same principles could be applied to the B-29, but with a terrifying modification? Instead of skip bombing with conventional explosives, what if the Superfortress could deliver experimental napalm canisters at ultra-low altitude, transforming entire sections of ocean into infernos that would consume wooden-hulled transports and drive crews from their stations through sheer thermal intensity? The B-29's massive fuel capacity would allow it to loiter over convoy routes for hours, waiting for targets. Its heavy defensive armament could be supplemented with additional forward-firing weapons, creating a flying fortress capable of suppressing anti-aircraft fire while simultaneously delivering incendiary death. The technical challenges are immense. B-29s are designed to operate in the thin air of the stratosphere, where their pressurized cabins give crews a survival advantage. Flying at sea level in tropical heat will push engines already prone to overheating into dangerous territory. The structural stress of low-altitude, high-speed flight could fatigue airframes designed for the relatively smooth air of high altitude. Removing the Norden bomb site and associated equipment to make room for additional guns and ammunition represents a significant modification that will take weeks per aircraft. Most problematic of all, the pilots who have trained for months to fly precision bombing missions from 30,000 feet will need to completely retrain for an entirely different kind of warfare, one where split-second timing and nerves of steel are the difference between success and being blown out of the sky by your own weapons. The man Hayes needs to make this work is sitting in the back of the room with his arms crossed, a skeptical expression on his weathered face. Lieutenant Colonel James "Iron Jim" McAllister is 45 years old, ancient by fighter pilot standards, but still flying combat missions because nobody can match his combination of skill and reckless courage. Before the war, McAllister had been a barnstormer, one of those daredevils who flew at county fairs, performing aerobatics in obsolete biplanes for crowds that gasped at every near miss. He joined the Army Air Corps in 1940, convinced that war was coming and determined to be part of it. His experience with low-altitude flying, his intuitive understanding of how aircraft behave in ground effect, and his reputation for being able to fly anything with wings make him the ideal test pilot for Hayes's experimental program. McAllister listens to Hayes's presentation with growing interest despite his initial skepticism. When the colonel finishes and opens the floor for questions, McAllister raises his hand. His voice carries the flat vowels of rural Kansas, a reminder of origins far from the centers of military power. He asks the question everyone is thinking but nobody wants to voice. How do you expect to get B-29 crews, men who have been trained to trust their altitude as protection, to voluntarily fly into the teeth of anti-aircraft fire at an altitude where every gun on a Japanese destroyer can reach them? How do you overcome the psychological barrier of deliberately doing what every instinct screams against? Hayes's answer reveals the depth of his planning. The crews will not be randomly selected or ordered into this program. They will be volunteers, men who understand the strategic importance of what they are attempting and who possess the particular combination of skill and temperament required for success. They will train for weeks before attempting their first combat mission, practicing against target ships in the Chesapeake Bay until the techniques become second nature. Most importantly, they will be told the truth about what they are being asked to do and why it matters. Hayes believes that American airmen, given honest information about risks and rewards, will volunteer for almost any mission if they understand its importance. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Conditional approval to proceed. He is authorized to modify 6 B-29s for low-altitude incendiary attack and to recruit volunteer crews for a special project designated Operation Wildfire. The code name is chosen deliberately. What Hayes proposes to unleash on Japanese shipping is nothing less than fire from the sky, a weapon that will make the ocean itself an enemy of anyone trying to cross it. If successful, Operation Wildfire will cut off Japan's remaining island garrisons from reinforcement and supply, hastening the war's end and potentially saving thousands of American lives that would be lost in invasions of heavily defended positions. The modification work begins in early February at a secure facility near Sacramento, California. The lead engineer is a civilian contractor named Dr. Elizabeth Thorne, one of the few women working in aerospace engineering during the war. Thorne had earned her doctorate from Caltech in 1938, writing a dissertation on airframe stress analysis that is still considered groundbreaking. When war came, she volunteered her services and quickly became indispensable to the Army Air Force's technical branch. Her assignment to Operation Wildfire is a sign of how seriously the military takes Hayes' proposal. They are giving him their best people. Thorne's first task is to solve the engine cooling problem. The B-29's Wright R-3350 engines are powerful but temperamental, prone to overheating even in normal operations. Operating at sea level in the heat and humidity of the Pacific will push them past their design limits unless significant modifications are made. Tharn designs an enhanced oil cooling system that adds weight but significantly improves thermal management. She also recommends limiting low-altitude operations to specific mission profiles, using altitude for transit and descending only for the actual attack run. This compromise preserves some of the B-29's advantages while minimizing exposure to the most dangerous thermal conditions. The weapons modifications are even more extensive. The standard B-29 carries a crew of 11 and is armed with 12 50-caliber machine guns in remote-controlled turrets, plus a tail position with a 20mm cannon. Thorne and her team add 8 additional 50-caliber guns in the nose, angled slightly downward to suppress deck-level targets. They mount twin 50-calibers in new waist positions, giving the aircraft formidable side-firing capability. The bomb bay is reconfigured to carry special incendiary canisters, each containing 200 gallons of napalm thickened with aluminum soap to make it stick to whatever it touches and burn at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The delivery mechanism is designed to release these canisters at altitudes between 100 and 300 feet, allowing them to impact the water surface and spread their contents across a wide area before ignition. The psychological preparation of the crews is handled by Major Sarah Brennan, an Army psychologist who specializes in combat stress and performance under pressure. Brennan conducts extensive interviews with each volunteer, assessing their capacity to handle the unique stresses of ultra-low altitude combat. She identifies several key psychological factors that distinguish successful low-altitude pilots from those who struggle. The ability to maintain focus in sensory overload environments, capacity to make rapid decisions with incomplete information, and most critically, the ability to suppress survival instincts that scream to gain altitude when under fire. These traits cannot be taught, only identified and strengthened through specific training techniques. By mid-March 1945, the first modified B-29s are ready for testing. The test site is a restricted section of San Francisco Bay, where the Navy has anchored several obsolete ships to serve as targets. McAllister pilots the first test run, bringing the massive bomber down to 200 feet and roaring past the target ship at 280 miles per hour. The noise is overwhelming, the vibration from low-altitude, high-speed flight rattling every rivet in the airframe. Releases the test canisters. They tumble through the air, trailing smoke before hitting the water and erupting in a sheet of flame that engulfs the target ship from stem to stern. The fire is so intense that paint blisters on the superstructure from 300 feet away. Observers on shore can feel the heat across a quarter-mile of open water. The test is a technical success, but reveals unexpected problems. The intensity of the fire creates a massive column of smoke and heated air that threatens to destabilize following aircraft. The solution is to attack in a specific pattern, with aircraft approaching from different vectors to avoid flying through the smoke plume. Additionally, the fire spreads across the water surface in unpredictable ways, depending on wind and current, meaning pilots must be prepared to adjust their escape routes instantaneously. These lessons are incorporated into the training program, where volunteer crews practice again and again until the attack sequence becomes automatic. While Hayes and his team perfect their weapon in California, events in the Pacific are creating the perfect opportunity to test it in combat. The battle for Okinawa has begun, and American forces are locked in a desperate struggle against fanatical Japanese resistance. The Japanese High Command, recognizing that Okinawa's loss will open the home islands to invasion, commits to a strategy of maximum resistance. Part of this strategy involves reinforcing the garrison with elite troops from the home islands, men trained specifically for the kind of close-quarters combat that characterizes the Okinawa battle. Intelligence reports indicate that a major reinforcement convoy is being assembled at Sasebo Naval Base on Kyushu, the southernmost of Japan's main islands. The convoy, designated Operation Ketsu-Go Phase Three, represents one of Japan's last attempts to influence the course of the war through conventional military operations. Vice Admiral Kiyoshi Hasegawa, commanding the escort force, is a veteran of countless convoy operations who has survived everything the Allies have thrown at him. His force consists of 12 destroyers, among the finest remaining in the Imperial Navy, and 15 transport ships carrying 8,400 troops of the 216th Division, a unit held in reserve specifically for the defense of the home islands. The transports also carry thousands of tons of ammunition, including the fearsome Type 3 anti-aircraft shells developed specifically to combat American air superiority. If this convoy reaches Okinawa, it could extend the battle by weeks or even months, costing thousands of additional American lives. Admiral Hasegawa's plan reflects the hard lessons learned from years of convoy operations under American air attack. The convoy will sail at night, hugging the Korean coast to stay under land-based air cover for as long as possible. Only for the final dash to Okinawa will they be exposed to American carrier aircraft, and Hasegawa has been promised heavy fighter cover from bases on Kyushu and Formosa. The route is carefully chosen to avoid known submarine patrol areas. Departure is scheduled for April 9th, with arrival at Okinawa on the morning of April 13th. The timing is calculated to minimize exposure during vulnerable daylight hours. Every detail has been considered, every contingency planned for. What Hasegawa cannot know is that American codebreakers have read every message related to the convoy's organization and route. His carefully planned operation is compromised before the first ship leaves port. The intelligence reaches Colonel Hayes through classified channels on April 3rd. A message from Pacific Fleet Intelligence provides departure date, composition, route, and estimated positions for the entire convoy operation. Hayes immediately recognizes this as the opportunity he has been waiting for. His modified B-29s are ready. His crews are trained. The target represents exactly the kind of high-value convoy that Operation Wildfire was designed to destroy. He requests and receives authorization to deploy 6 aircraft to Tinian in the Mariana Islands, positioning them within striking range of the convoy's 1,900-mile route to Okinawa. Projected route. The mission is designated Operation Wildfire Alpha, and it carries the highest priority classification. Success could validate a completely new approach to maritime interdiction. Failure will be expensive in both equipment and lives. The 6 B-29s of Operation Wildfire Alpha depart California on April 5th, island-hopping across the Pacific to reach Tinian. The flight is uneventful, but reveals the limitations of the modified aircraft. The additional weight of guns and ammunition reduces range, forcing more frequent fuel stops. The enhanced cooling systems work as designed, but pilots report that the aircraft handles differently than standard B-29s, feeling heavier in turns and slower to respond. These are not insurmountable problems, but they remind everyone involved that they are pushing the envelope of what this aircraft can do. McAllister commands the flight, with Hayes accompanying as an observer in the lead aircraft. The colonel wants to see his creation in action, to witness whether months of work and millions of dollars in modifications will produce the decisive results he has promised. As they approach Tinian on April 8th, Hayes feels a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Everything is in place. The target is confirmed. The weapon is ready. Soon they will discover whether Operation Wildfire represents a revolution in aerial warfare or an expensive mistake. Tinian Island in April 1945 is one of the most important military installations in the Pacific. From its runways, B-29s launch daily to bomb Japanese cities, a campaign of strategic bombardment that is systematically destroying Japan's ability to wage war. The arrival of 6 modified superfortresses carrying special weapons creates immediate curiosity among the resident bomber crews. Hayes briefs them on the mission in general terms, explaining that they will be attempting a new form of attack against a high-value naval target. He does not mention the specific target or timing, operational security being paramount. What he does emphasize is that this mission, if successful, could provide a template for future anti-shipping operations that will make it impossible for Japan to move forces by sea. The crews of Operation Wildfire Alpha spend April 9th and 10th in final preparations. Each aircraft is checked and rechecked. The incendiary canisters are loaded under tight security, their contents too dangerous and too secret to risk exposure. Pilots study reconnaissance photographs of the convoy's projected route, memorizing landmarks and calculating approach vectors. Navigators plot courses that will bring them to the interception point at exactly the right time. Gunners test their weapons, ensuring that the added .50 calibers function perfectly. Everyone involved understands that they will get one chance to prove the concept. There will be no second attempt if they fail. On the evening of April 11th, Hayes gathers the crews for a final briefing. He shows them the latest intelligence reports, confirming that the Japanese convoy departed Sasebo on schedule and is currently proceeding along its planned route. Weather forecasts predict clear conditions with light winds, ideal for low-altitude operations. The convoy's estimated position at dawn on April 12th places it in the East China Sea, approximately 150 miles west of Okinawa, having just left the protection of land-based air cover. This is the vulnerable window Hayes has been waiting for. The convoy will be in open water, too far from friendly airfields for effective fighter support, moving at the predictable speed of its slowest ships. It is, in military terms, a perfect target. Hayes explains the attack plan in detail. The 6 B-29s will approach at 15,000 feet, using altitude for protection until they are within 50 miles of the convoy. They will then descend to attack altitude, approaching from the southwest with the rising sun behind them to hamper visual detection. The attack will begin at first light, catching the convoy in the vulnerable transition between night operations and day, when crews are tired and reaction times are slowest. Each aircraft will make a single pass through the convoy formation, releasing its incendiary canisters over the transport ships while suppressing defensive fire with the supplemental guns. After the attack, they will climb rapidly to altitude and return to Tinian. Estimated time over target is 4 minutes. In those 4 minutes, they will either validate Operation Wildfire or learn that some ideas work better in theory than in practice. McAllister addresses the crews after Hayes finishes. His message is characteristically direct. They are about to attempt something that has never been done before. Flying a 4-engine strategic bomber at sea level against warships violates every doctrine, every training manual, every instinct they possess. The aircraft was not designed for this. They were not trained for this. But if they execute the attack as planned, they will sink more enemy shipping in 4 minutes than most submarines sink in a month. They will cut off reinforcements to Okinawa, potentially saving thousands of American lives. And they will prove that American ingenuity and courage can overcome any defense. McAllister concludes with a simple statement that becomes the unofficial motto of Operation Wildfire. When they tell you something cannot be done, prove them wrong. The B-29s lift off from Tinian at 0245 hours on April 12, 1945. The night is clear and moonless, the stars brilliant in the tropical sky. Each aircraft carries a crew of 12 instead of the standard 11, the extra man being a photographer whose job is to document the attack for intelligence analysis. The bombers form up over the ocean and set course for the interception point, climbing slowly to cruising altitude. Inside the pressurized cabins, crews run through final checks, their voices calm and professional over the intercom. There is little conversation. Everyone is focused on the task ahead, running through mental rehearsals of what they will do when the time comes. The flight to the target takes 3 hours and 40 minutes. As the B-29s cross the East China Sea, navigators track their progress against landmarks barely visible in the darkness below. The tension builds gradually as dawn approaches, and with it, the moment of commitment. At 0615 hours, radar operators pick up surface contacts at the expected position. Hayes, monitoring the radio net from the lead aircraft, confirms with Pacific Fleet intelligence that no friendly forces are in the area. The contacts can only be the Japanese convoy. He gives the order to begin the attack descent. The 6 B-29s peel off one by one, transitioning from the relatively safe environment of high altitude to the danger zone below. As they descend through 10,000 feet, crews depressurize the cabins and open gun ports. The roar of slipstream fills the aircraft, a physical reminder of the violence to come. Through 5,000 feet, pilots begin their final approach vectors, spacing their aircraft to attack from slightly different angles as planned. At 1,000 feet, the ocean surface becomes clearly visible in the pre-dawn twilight, waves outlined in silver by the rising sun behind them. And there, spread across miles of dark water, are the ships of the Japanese convoy. Lieutenant Commander Takeshi Morimoto has been awake for 20 hours, sustained by strong tea and the nervous energy that comes from commanding a warship in dangerous waters. His destroyer, the Hibiki, is one of the oldest ships in Admiral Hasegawa's escort force, a survivor of countless battles who has earned the nickname Lucky Ship among her crew. Morimoto does not believe in luck. He believes in preparation, vigilance, and the skill of his sailors. For 3 days, they have maintained perfect anti-aircraft discipline, every gun manned, every lookout alert. They are only hours from their destination, so close that Morimoto can almost taste the relief of successful mission completion. The first indication that something is wrong comes from a lookout in the forward crow's nest who reports aircraft approaching from the southwest. Morimoto immediately orders battle stations, but there is no panic. Aircraft have shadowed them before, high-altitude reconnaissance planes that the convoy's guns cannot reach. This will be the same. Except it is not the same. Through binoculars, Morimoto watches in growing horror as the aircraft, clearly identifiable now as B-29 Superfortresses, continued to descend. They are not climbing to bombing altitude, they're coming lower, impossibly lower, until they are barely above the wave tops and racing toward the convoy at what appears to be maximum speed. Admiral Hasegawa aboard the destroyer Yukikatse sees the same thing and immediately grasps its significance. This is not a conventional attack. This is something new, something unexpected, and therefore terribly dangerous. He orders all ships to open fire immediately and to begin evasive maneuvers, but even as he gives the commands, he knows they are inadequate. The convoy is in relatively confined waters with limited room to maneuver. The destroyers are positioned to defend against submarine attack and high-altitude bombing, not low-level assault. And the attackers are closing so fast that there is barely time to react. McAllister brings his B-29 in at 250 feet, engines screaming with the power required to maintain 280 miles per hour at low altitude. Ahead, he can see the convoy clearly now, destroyers on the perimeter, transport ships in the center, exactly as intelligence predicted. Tracers arc up toward his aircraft, streams of fire from dozens of guns, but most are shooting too high, gunners confused by the unprecedented sight of a superfortress at sea level. The extra nose guns open up, their combined firepower literally hosing the deck of the nearest destroyer with 50 caliber rounds. Morimoto's Hibiki is that destroyer, and in seconds her forward gun positions are shredded, crew members killed or driven below by the overwhelming volume of fire. McAllister releases his incendiary canisters at precisely 300 feet, watching through his bombardier's scope as they tumble end over end toward the clustered transport ships. The canisters hit the water surface with massive splashes, their momentum carrying them forward in skipping trajectories that carry them directly into the hulls of the nearest transports. For a heartbeat, nothing happens, and McAllister wonders if the fusing mechanism has failed. Then the ocean erupts in a wall of flame that climbs 50 feet into the air, a curtain of fire so intense that the paint on his aircraft's belly blisters despite his altitude. The napalm spreads across the water's surface with terrifying speed, flowing like liquid death around the transport ships and igniting their wooden superstructures on contact. The transport Hokuriku Maru, carrying 1,200 troops of the 216th Division, becomes the first victim of this new form of warfare. The fire engulfs her from bow to stern in less than 30 seconds, the heat so intense that steel buckles and glass melts. Below decks, Soldiers trapped in packed compartments have no chance of escape. Those who make it to the deck find themselves facing an impossible choice between burning alive or jumping into water that is itself aflame. Some choose the water, hoping to swim clear of the inferno, but the napalm clings to skin and clothing, continuing to burn even underwater. The screams of dying men carry across the ocean, audible even over the roar of aircraft engines and exploding ammunition. The second B-29, piloted by Captain Raymond Fisher, a former crop duster from Nebraska who joined the Army Air Corps in 1942, targets the transport cluster from a different angle. His approach takes him directly over the destroyer Asahikaze, whose anti-aircraft crews have finally adjusted their aim to the unprecedented low altitude of the attackers. Tracers stream past Fisher's cockpit, some close enough that he can see individual bullets passing through his field of vision. A burst of 20mm shells from the destroyer's stern mount tears through the B-29's No. 3 engine, shredding the cowling and sending fragments of hot metal into the wing. Fire warning lights illuminate on Fisher's panel, but he holds his course, trusting his flight engineer to handle the engine fire while he completes his attack run. Fisher's bombardier, Lieutenant Thomas Chin, a Chinese-American from San Francisco, whose family had fled the Japanese invasion of China, has personal reasons for the intensity with which he approaches his work. Through his targeting scope, he can see Japanese sailors manning their guns, officers on bridge wings shouting orders, the organized chaos of a warship under attack. He feels no hatred, only a cold, professional satisfaction as he pickles off the incendiary canisters at exactly the right moment. The canisters arc down, trailing smoke, and detonate against the transport Nagato Maru with devastating effect. The ship, loaded with ammunition, including thousands of artillery shells destined for Okinawa's defense, explodes in a secondary detonation that sends a mushroom cloud of flame and debris 300 feet into the air. The shockwave rocks every ship in the convoy and blows out windows on the bridge of Admiral Hasegawa's flagship half a mile away. Aboard the destroyer Hibiki, Lieutenant Commander Morimoto watches his convoy disintegrate around him. 4 transports are already burning, their crews abandoning ship into water that offers no safety. 2 more have been hit by the cascading secondary explosions as ammunition stores cook off in the heat. His own ship has taken damage from the nose guns of the first B-29, his forward fire control position destroyed, a dozen men dead or wounded. He orders helm hard to starboard, trying to position Hibiki between the remaining transports and the next wave of attackers, a futile gesture of defiance against overwhelming firepower. As he gives the order, he catches sight of his executive officer's face, the younger man's eyes wide with something approaching terror. Morimoto understands that expression. They are witnessing something that naval doctrine has no answer for, a weapon that transforms the ocean itself into an instrument of death. The 3rd and 4th B-29s attack in close succession, their bombardiers working with the precision born of countless practice runs. Major Diana Kowalski, flying only her 2nd combat mission, but possessing a natural gift for low-altitude flying developed during her pre-war career as an air racer, brings her aircraft so low that her propellers leave visible disturbances on the wavetops. Her gunners rake the destroyer Hamikaze with concentrated fire, killing or wounding most of the crew of the forward main battery before they can train their guns on her aircraft. The incendiary canisters she releases skip across the water like stones, impacting 3 different transport ships and spreading fire across an area roughly the size of 2 football fields. The effectiveness of the weapon exceeds even the optimistic predictions of its designers. The napalm, thickened with aluminum soap to increase adhesion and burning temperature, proves nearly impossible to extinguish with conventional shipboard firefighting equipment. Lieutenant Commander Morimoto makes a decision that will haunt him for the rest of his life. Seeing that the transports are doomed, that his destroyer cannot possibly save them, he orders Hibiki to break off from the convoy and make maximum speed for Okinawa. His reasoning is coldly practical. If he stays, his ship will be destroyed along with everything else. If he escapes, he can at least report what happened here, warn other convoys of this new threat.
His executive officer protests, pointing out that hundreds of men are in the water, that Japanese naval tradition demands they attempt rescue. Morimoto overrides him with a harshness born of desperation. The living matter more than the dead, and if they remain, they will simply add to the casualty count. He orders flank speed and never looks back, though the screams of drowning men follow him across miles of burning ocean. Admiral Hasegawa aboard Yukikaze faces the same calculation, but reaches a different conclusion. As the senior officer present, he feels responsibility for every man in the convoy, soldier and sailor alike. He orders his destroyer and the 3 others still capable of maneuvering to begin rescue operations immediately,
knowing even as he gives the order that it condemns them to remaining in the target area where they are vulnerable to further attack. 2 of his destroyer captains acknowledge the order and comply. The third, commanding Shimakaze, ignores the order and flees at maximum speed, her captain apparently deciding that survival outweighs honor. Hasegawa makes note of the man's name for future court-martial, assuming any of them survive to face future consequences. The 5th B-29, piloted by Major Robert Thornton, a former airline pilot whose peacetime experience flying commercial routes across the Pacific gives him intimate knowledge of these waters, encounters a problem that the training simulations never fully replicated. The smoke from burning ships has created a dense black column that rises thousands of feet, obscuring visibility and creating severe turbulence. Thornton flies into this maelstrom at 260 miles per hour and immediately loses visual reference. His instruments spin wildly as the aircraft is buffeted by thermals rising from the inferno below. For several terrifying seconds, he flies blind, trusting his instruments while his co-pilot calls out altitude in a voice that remains steady despite the circumstances. They emerge from the smoke column with less than 100 feet of clearance, so low that Thornton can see individual faces of Japanese sailors looking up at them in shock and terror. The incendiary canisters Thornton releases land directly on the transport Yoshino Maru, a ship that had survived 3 years of war only to meet her end in the worst possible way. The napalm ignites the ship's cargo of aviation fuel, creating an explosion that vaporizes the entire forward section and sends burning debris arcing across the water to ignite 2 nearby vessels. Over 800 men die in less than a minute, most of them never knowing what killed them. The force of the explosion damages Thornton's aircraft, blowing out several windows in the rear fuselage and wounding 2 gunners with flying debris. But the B-29's rugged construction allows it to remain airborne and controllable. The 6th and final B-29 of the first wave, commanded by Captain Jennifer Martinez, the only female pilot in Operation Wildfire, and a source of some controversy given the military's general policies about women in combat, makes her attack run with textbook precision. Martinez had fought for 2 years to be allowed into combat flying, leveraging her considerable political connections and exceptional flying skills to overcome institutional resistance. Now, approaching a burning Japanese convoy at wave-top height, with anti-aircraft fire filling the air around her, she experiences a moment of perfect clarity. This is exactly where she belongs, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Her bombardier releases the canisters with perfect timing, and Martinez pulls up sharply, threading her aircraft between columns of smoke with a grace that seems impossible for such a large machine. Her incendiary canisters strike the transport Kuroshiyo Maru, the flagship of the transport group, killing the convoy's Army commander Major Hideki Yamashita instantly when the bridge is engulfed in flame. With him dies the carefully coordinated defense plan for Okinawa's northern sector, knowledge and experience that cannot be replaced. The 900 soldiers packed into Kuroshiyo Maru's holds have almost no chance of escape. Those who make it topside find a landscape of fire, the very water around the ship burning with supernatural intensity. Some jump anyway, preferring a quick death by drowning to the slower agony of burning. Others huddle below decks, praying for a miracle that will not come. In the space of 4 minutes and 30 seconds, the Japanese convoy, designated Operation Ketsu-Go Phase Three, ceases to exist as a fighting force. 11 of 15 transport ships are burning or sinking, their cargoes of men and ammunition lost. 3 destroyers have been damaged severely enough to compromise their combat effectiveness.
The ocean for miles around is covered with burning oil and debris, dotted with hundreds of
men struggling to survive in water that is itself a weapon. The revolutionary weapon conceived in a hangar in Ohio, refined through months of testing, and delivered by 6 modified B-29 Superfortresses, has proven devastatingly effective. Colonel Hayes, observing the attack from the navigator's position in McAllister's aircraft, feels a complex mixture of emotions: pride in the weapon's effectiveness, horror at the scale of destruction it has caused, and a grim satisfaction that the gamble has paid off. Through his camera, the mission photographer captures images that will become classified for decades, too graphic and too revealing of American capabilities to be released to the public. The photographs show men burning, ships exploding, and an ocean transformed into hell. They also show the cold effectiveness of applied technology, the reduction of human beings to targets in a larger strategic calculation. McAllister leads the formation in a climbing turn, gaining altitude for the return flight to Tinian. As they climbed through 5,000 feet, the full scope of the destruction becomes visible. The convoy's formation, so neat and organized hours before, is now a scattered collection of burning hulks and debris fields. The survivors are clustered in groups, clinging to wreckage or struggling to swim clear of the oil slicks. Some of the Japanese destroyers are attempting rescue operations, but it is immediately obvious that they cannot possibly save everyone. The mathematics are brutal and unforgiving. Too many men in the water, too few ships to rescue them, and the sharks are already arriving, drawn by the blood and vibration of dying men. Admiral Hasegawa, aboard Yukikaze, coordinates the rescue effort with the same methodical competence he has brought to every aspect of his naval career. He establishes priorities: officers first, then specialists like medics and communications personnel, then ordinary soldiers and sailors in order of their proximity to rescue vessels. It is a coldly logical system that maximizes the value of those saved, though it means condemning hundreds of men to certain death. Hasegawa knows he will face criticism for these decisions, possibly court-martial, but he also knows that emotional rescue efforts that save randomly rather than strategically serve no one. By late morning, his destroyers have pulled approximately 900 men from the water. Over 7,000 remain missing, most certainly dead. The return flight to Tinian takes slightly longer than the outbound journey due to headwinds and the need to nurse damaged engines. Fisher's No. 3 engine finally quits completely, forcing him to feather the propeller and redistribute power to the remaining 3 engines. Thornton's aircraft leaks hydraulic fluid from damaged lines, making the flight controls increasingly stiff. Martinez reports electrical problems that suggest damage to the main distribution panel. All 6 aircraft are carrying wounded crew members, men hit by anti-aircraft fire during the attack runs. The photographer in McAllister's aircraft, a young lieutenant named David Chang, who had been documenting the mission, sits quietly in the back with his cameras, visibly shaken by what he has witnessed and recorded. They land at Tinian in early afternoon to find a significant welcoming committee. Word of the mission's success has already reached Pacific Fleet headquarters, and senior officers have gathered to debrief the crews and inspect the aircraft. The B-29s show extensive damage, far more than anticipated. Hayes conducts a quick assessment and concludes that while the attack succeeded brilliantly, the cost in aircraft wear and crew stress is significant. This is not a tactic that can be repeated frequently without risking aircraft and lives. The B-29s will need extensive maintenance and repairs between missions. The crews will need rest and psychological support. The weapon works, but it is not a sustainable solution for everyday anti-shipping operations. The intelligence analysis of the attack begins immediately.
Reconnaissance aircraft flying over the battle site that afternoon report 15 ships sinking or sunk, with 4 freighters and 3 destroyers sustaining significant damage.
Debris scattered across 20 square miles of ocean. Radio intercepts of Japanese communications reveal panic and confusion in the surviving destroyer force, with reports of a new American superweapon that can turn the ocean itself into flame. The psychological impact on Japanese naval forces proves almost as significant as the physical destruction. Convoy commanders receiving these reports begin demanding that all future operations be conducted only under conditions of absolute air superiority, a condition that Japan can no longer guarantee anywhere in the Pacific. The strategic consequences of Operation Wildfire Alpha ripple outward through the theater. On Okinawa, the American ground forces preparing for another week of desperate fighting against reinforced Japanese positions instead find resistance beginning to crumble. The expected elite reinforcements never arrive. Ammunition stockpiles that would have sustained prolonged defense are at the bottom of the East China Sea. Japanese commanders on the island, realizing they will receive no further support, begin making preparations for a last-ditch defense that they know cannot succeed. The battle for Okinawa, already brutal beyond description, moves toward its inevitable conclusion weeks earlier than intelligence estimates had predicted. In Washington, news of the attack reaches the Joint Chiefs of Staff through classified channels. The reaction is complex and somewhat divided. Army Air Force's leadership sees validation of strategic bombing doctrine and proof that B-29s can be employed in roles beyond high-altitude attacks on cities. Naval leadership, while acknowledging the attack's effectiveness, expresses concern about the precedent of using strategic bombers for tactical missions that carriers and submarines traditionally handle. There is also quiet discomfort about the weapon's nature, the use of incendiary devices that cause particularly horrible deaths. This discomfort is not sufficient to halt the program, but it does lead to restrictions on its use and classification of the weapon's details at the highest levels. The Japanese response to the disaster unfolds over the following days. Emperor Hirohito, receiving reports of the convoy's destruction, convenes an emergency meeting of the Supreme War Council. The loss of an entire division plus the elite naval forces escorting it represents a blow that Japan's depleted military can ill afford. More concerning is the revelation that American forces possess a weapon capable of preventing any future large-scale troop movements by sea. Admiral Soimu Toyoda, chief of the Naval General Staff, argues that the home island's defense depends on being able to move troops between them, a capability now called into question. General Yoshijiro Umezu, chief of the Army General Staff, counters that the attack demonstrates the impossibility of conventional defense and the need to consider options previously rejected as unthinkable. The diplomatic implications become apparent when neutral observers in Switzerland report to their governments about the new American weapon. The International Red Cross issues a quiet inquiry about whether incendiary weapons used against ships carrying troops violate the Geneva Conventions. The American response is carefully calibrated. The weapons were used against military targets in legitimate combat operations, and while regrettable, civilian casualties were not intended. The fact that transport ships carrying combat troops are legitimate military targets under international law provides legal cover, though it does not address the moral questions about using weapons that cause particularly horrible deaths. For the survivors of the convoy, the weeks following the attack are a mixture of physical recovery and psychological trauma. The rescued men, treated for burns, wounds, and exposure at Japanese naval hospitals, struggle with nightmares and survivor guilt. Many cannot eat, haunted by memories of comrades burning or drowning. Some develop what modern medicine would recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder.
Though in 1945, such conditions are simply classified as battle fatigue or weakness of spirit. A few commit suicide, unable to reconcile their survival with the deaths of thousands of comrades. The Japanese military, focused on the immediate crisis of defending the home islands, has little time or resources for psychological care. Lieutenant Commander Morimoto faces a court of inquiry investigating his decision to abandon the convoy and flee to Okinawa. The inquiry board, composed of senior naval officers, hears testimony about the attack, the impossible tactical situation, and Morimoto's reasoning for preserving his ship rather than attempting futile rescue operations. The verdict is split. Some officers view his actions as pragmatic and correct given the circumstances. Others see cowardice and dereliction of duty. The final judgment is qualified. Morimoto is reprimanded but not dismissed. His actions deemed understandable if not commendable. He remains in command of Hibiki,
but knows his career is effectively over, his reputation permanently stained by the decision to prioritize survival over honor. Admiral Hasegawa, by contrast, is commended for his rescue efforts despite the heavy losses. His decision to remain in the target area and pull men from the water is seen as upholding the highest traditions of the Imperial Navy. That his ships were not attacked again is attributed to luck rather than judgment, but the result is the same. Hasegawa receives a promotion and a new command, though privately he tells his wife that he would trade the promotion to forget the sight of thousands of men burning in the water that should have been their salvation. The American crews of Operation Wildfire Alpha receive less public recognition due to the mission's classified nature. Hayes and McAllister are awarded the Distinguished Service Cross in a small private ceremony. The other pilots receive Silver Stars. The gunners and bombardiers receive Distinguished Flying Crosses. The citations are vague, referring only to exceptional performance against a strategic target. The crews are sworn to secrecy about the mission's details, a restriction that will not be lifted for over 30 years. For men who have participated in one of the most significant air-sea battles of the Pacific War, the inability to speak about it creates its own burden. The psychological toll on the American crews becomes apparent in the weeks following the mission. Several crew members request transfer to other duties, unable to reconcile their training as strategic bombers with the close-quarters killing they participated in. McAllister loses weight and develops insomnia, haunted by memories of men burning in the water. Major Kowalski writes extensively in her journal about the moral complexity of war, questioning whether the strategic necessity of destroying the convoy justified the method used. These private doubts are never shared publicly, but they reflect a broader unease about weapons that deliberately maximize suffering. Dr. Elizabeth Thorne, the engineer who solved the technical problems that made Operation Wildfire possible, experiences her own complicated reaction to its success. She had approached the project as a technical challenge, focusing on heat transfer equations and structural stress analysis. Seeing photographs of the actual results forces her to confront the human consequences of her work. She continues with the program, designing improvements to the weapon system, but privately questions whether scientific achievement can be separated from moral responsibility. This question will occupy her for the rest of her life, eventually leading her to become an advocate for arms control in the post-war period. The weapon itself undergoes further development despite concerns about its nature.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.